And the big problem we've had before Obamacare is that it was already treated quasi as a right. You had it heavily regulated on the state level. It is continually heavily regulated. The idea there's a completely unregulated market is absolute nonsense. The reason that you have employer-based health insurance in the first place was as a response to wage and price controls placed in the aftermath of World War II, and employers began giving health insurance as an actual good, right? They gave it as an actual incentive to their employees. If you had an actual individual-based health insurance market, you bought it just like you bought your car insurance, you would see more and better health care for everyone.
Yep. All right. So, Ben, I don't want to steal health insurance from you. I want you to be healthy. That's why I want Medicare for all.
You just want to take my money and my wife's services.
Yeah, that's insurance. That's how it works. It's like the people with that are not getting into accidents are subsidizing the accidents. Yes, that's car insurance. That's how insurance works. And yes, taxes work in that we all decide we're going to do X, but we're not going to do Y. And I think it is fair for society to say that yes, we are going to do health care for everybody. Everybody. We're not going to leave 20 million people uninsured. We're not going to leave 30 million people uninsured. That's not what we do in a civilized society. Conservatives agree or say all the time that the golden era of America was the 1950s and 1960s. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. Our economy was booming at the time, and we became the #1 economy in the world at that time. The tax rate for the highest bracket fluctuated between 70 and 91%. So that is when we were at our best. Now, I want to be clear. I'm also a businessman, and boy, that seems high. It does, okay? And one of the reasons my family were Republicans when I was growing up was because before Reagan came in, the highest marginal tax rate was 70%. So now we are nowhere near that. We have reduced taxes to bare bones, and we have shifted the taxes onto the middle class and away from the rich and corporations.
Talk about top marginal tax rates in the 1950s. There are a couple things that are worth noting. One, that was top individual marginal tax rates, not necessarily the business tax rate. We now have some of the highest corporate tax rates altogether in the industrialized world. And if you would prefer for us to destroy half of the world before we become the only country that didn't have its industrial capacity destroyed, which is what happened in the 1940s, leading to us being the only productive country on planet Earth, essentially, for the next 2 decades, I'm not with you there. I'm not really in favor of having a giant world war that destroys all industrial capacity across the West, so we're the only people who actually have the capacity to produce anything and just markets that we can provide to.
Right. We tried supply side economics. Hey, Kansas, how's that working out for you? So there's this myth that
it's working out for you. Your business is doing great.
Okay, yeah. Well, we just had 8 years of Obama. So, corporations are not evil. They just want to maximize profit. That is what they're built for. So please don't be naive and be like, no, but the corporations will look out for our interests. No, they look out for their bottom line.
Well, I mean, and as far as this idea that, corporations they don't have any of your interests at heart. You're a corporation. TYT's it's a corporation. You have 80 employees. I assume that you're not just a greedy asshole, and that you actually would like to help your employees from time to time. And you just talked about how under Obama, everything got better with your business. Well, under Obama, he didn't radically escalate taxes. Okay, there was not a radical escalation of taxes under President Obama. And finally, when you seem to be identifying a higher tax rate in the 1950s with higher level of growth. So if that's the case, why not just tax everybody at 100% and we can have massive growth from here to eternity?
I use the example of the 91% and the 70% to give you a sense of that I was surprised and you'd be surprised to find out that our economy was booming in those times. That's not to say that that is the right tax rate for us today. And so the exercise of finding the right tax rate is, guys, try to follow along, okay? It's called logic. So it would be preposterous to set the tax rate at 0. It would be preposterous to set it at 100%. So what we have to do as a society is figure out where we can maximize the most amount of good for the country.
Should it be closer to 0 or closer
for the
to
government,
100?
but not too much away from us. So, for example, the reason why when taxes are higher, it winds up being better for the economy is because it recirculates the money. So if you give it to the rich, this is hilarious. If you're uneducated, please at least don't don't make it obvious.
This is the most interesting conversation on taxes I've heard.
If you don't know the concept of recirculation of money, then go look it up. And so the way that it works is that when the middle class has more money, disposable income, they spend it. Why? Because they're not living in the lap of luxury. They're not saving it for their yacht. So they need to buy food for their family, they need education for their family, so they spend it and it goes back into the economy. If you just give it in supply side economics to the rich and hope that it trickles down on us eventually decades later, what they wind up doing with it is something that is logical. They save it. But that means it does not recirculate in the economy. And that is why when you have lower taxes, ironically, the economy does worse. But of course it's a balancing act.
The problem with Keynesian economics is that it doesn't even work in theory because, again, once you go to the logical extreme, which is remove all of the money from the rich people who are saving all their money and give it to all the poor people to buy hamburgers, that doesn't help the economy or spur the economy. What spurs the economy is a higher level... What spurs the economy is the creation of new products and services, and that is only going to be done by people who have expendable capital to actually invest in the new products and services that we all enjoy. This is what creates economic growth.
Speaking of oversimplistic, to say that, oh, well, they'll go buy hamburgers with it, come on.
You were the one who said
So
food.
the middle class is struggling right now, and we've turned this into a Walmart economy where people are getting $7.25. And that if you're getting around $10, I think that's about $15,000 a year. So that is serious pain and difficulties. So if you give those people money, it's not like, I just want to go get a hamburger.
No, they
desperately need that money, and they will spend it all back into the economy. So that's an economic fact. And so, and taxes is not stealing from you. So you're right, I run a business. So in order for my employees to get to my company, you know what they have to do? They have to drive on roads. Okay, so it's not stealing from me to build that road. That helps my business. They had to go to school. The fact that they went to public schools allows them to work for me. All these things are things that I benefit from. I didn't build that company by myself. Every single person that works there helped me to build that company. And
as far as the idea that I'm somehow being, dismissive toward people who are buying hamburgers, I'm not. I'm saying the people who are poor need to buy hamburgers to feed their children. They don't have the money to invest in building an iPhone because when you're just trying to get by and you are living in a Walmart subsistence economy, you're using that money to buy the products and services you need to get by. That does not create new products and services that become cheaper over time through competition. You need somebody to make those investments. You said this about Glass-Steagall, for example. You said the banks, they might make their own investments. In what? In what? They're not investing in themselves. I mean, they have to take that money and then they have to use it to invest in something else. Places like Apple, some that fail and some that succeed. This idea that banks are somehow evils is just not the case unless you are talking about them working in Congress. Here you and I agree, working in congruity with a Congress, with a legislature that is attempting to give them kickbacks. Both you and I agree on.
You say, well, what's the difference between your speech and their speech? Mine is actually speech, and theirs is money. So there's a giant difference.
But you spend money on your speech.
So first off, so they say, no, Supreme Court says, no, money is speech now. No, money is property. It's not speech. And so if money was speech, well, then if you go to a hooker and you say, oh, no, officer, I was just talking to her. Okay, money is not speech. So, for example, to give you a sense of it, to compare me saying I like Bernie Sanders and you saying whoever you like is the equivalent of this is obviously nonsensical. I believe it's obvious. So in a recent five-year period, the top 200 corporate givers, they both in donations and in lobbying spent $5.8 billion, okay? So that is not the same thing as me saying, hey, I like what Bernie's saying about college and Medicare. And when they did, why do you think they did? It was not because, hey, they genuinely like Bernie or Trump or Hillary. Because in return for that $5.8 billion, they got $4.4 trillion in government subsidies. So
now, when it comes to the idea that all money in politics is bad, again, I ask you, final question, final point on, we're going through 10 points at a time here, but final point here. When you say money in politics is bad, again, I ask you, Buddy Roemer gave you $4 million to start TYT. What did he expect in return? Should he not have given you money? Was the money not speech? It was just money, after all. It was just like a hooker, I assume. So are you the prostitute? How did this work? When you take money from Al Jazeera, does that make you a hooker for the Qataris? How does that work?
That was an awesome conflation. Okay, we were talking about money in politics and how money is not speech when you give it as a campaign donation, and you turn it around to a business investment. You know, in a business investment, it has nothing to do with speech. Money is money. They gave us an investment, because they believed in our business. That has nothing to do with politics.
That's great, and you think the government is in the business of regulating business. So if the government is in the business of regulating business, what would be the problem with the government telling Buddy Roemer he is not allowed to invest in your business?
No, those are two different issues. No problem. No, one thing is to say, hey, let's set reasonable limitations on what can happen around elections, which is, again, what most developed Western countries do.
Because it's a free country and I get to spend my money wherever I damn well please.
All right. So, as we're coming to the close here, we're going to do one more.
I got to ask him. All right,
very quick,
so you damn well please. Okay, so when the Koch brothers or Bloomberg or Soros puts in hundreds of millions of dollars into elections, you think, well, I just do them because they're good guys and they damn well please buying all those politicians. Or you think, no, the politicians would never be affected by hundreds of millions of dollars in legalized bribes.
Okay.
And you can't just spend your money anywhere you want. Of course there are rules. You can't bribe people.
Right.
There's many things you can't do with your money. And one of those should be bribing politicians, but we made it legal.
Cenk.
So I'm curious what your opinion on that is. Do you think that they're just golly shucks? They just mean well? And
Cenk, you're a lawyer, so you know that bribery requires two parties to the bribe. If I give money to a politician, there must be something in return. If there is no quid pro quo, there is no bribery.
You think there's nothing in return?
Well, you
think the politicians don't do those favors?
I think very often there is something in return, but I want you to point me to the things that are in return, not just say that all spending on politics ought to be forbidden except for the Young Turks.
No, that is of course not what we say. If you want to get money out of politics and then you said the Young Turks cannot donate money to politicians, I'd say, of course, that's the whole point of getting money out of politics.
Wait, so
Cenk,
so
this idea that you,
Cenk, come on.
It's so disingenuous. Even if you're a Republican and you're a conservative, you think there isn't crony capitalism? You think that $4.4 trillion that went in subsidies isn't because they got campaign donations? You know it's because they got campaign donations.
Cenk, okay, final question.
This is going to be the last word on this.
Final thing here on this, okay? Final question on this. So, Young Turks is super successful. We have 80 million uniques. It's wonderful. Do you think Bernie Sanders would care more if you gave him $10,000 or if you dedicated your entire network to kissing his ass for an election cycle?
All right. So, two things about this. First of all, I think you and I will agree that what we did in praising some of Bernie's programs, a lot of Bernie's programs, but not all. For example, I disagree with him on guns, and I thought Hillary's education program was slightly better than Bernie's. And by the way, I agree with Republicans on the Export-Import Bank. So it's not blind allegiance. That is not what we do, not remotely, okay? Second of all, I think you'll agree with me that the mainstream media kissing Hillary Clinton's ass for 2 straight years was a much bigger problem.
Would you outline?
Now, the distinction that you're asking for The
Would you outlaw
distinction that
that?
you're asking for, and now I've answered, I think, 4 times is, one is speech, and by the way, protected, you said life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I think we all agree to that. I got a big applause line. I also agree. And in our Constitution, the First Amendment is right to speech and freedom of the press. So that is that rubric. Money is not in the First Amendment. There is no right to spend money on politicians. Money is money, speech is speech.